You're listening to Green Ovation with Diane Naidu, the show where global warming is always a hot topic and green entrepreneurs are even hotter, where we chat to ordinary citizens who are innovating extraordinary climate solutions.
Good morning, listeners, and you're tuned into the Green Ovation show with me, Diane Naidu. You know what we talk about every week when we get together. We talk all things climate change, all things sustainability, and one of my favorite topics, as always, entrepreneurship and innovation in that entrepreneurship space. This morning, we are joined in studio by Mags Pillay, who is the director for the Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site. So yes, it's finally happened. We have a guest in studio talking tourism, sustainable tourism, and the role of tourism in not only driving our local economy, but also in ensuring that we preserve and protect and conserve our natural resources. Welcome, Mags.
Thank you, Diane.
We're so happy to have you in studio today, and today is obviously that big day, the day before you launch this new fossil find. It's happening at Maropeng tomorrow. I always despair. For me, it's a lot of talk about bones, but I know it's a lot more than just bones. So this new find at Maropeng, or in one of the caves, is called Neo. Tell us a bit about this launch that's happening tomorrow.
Okay, firstly, Diane, thank you for having me on the show. I think just to clarify one thing, Maropeng is the official visitor center in the Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site, which is a much bigger area. It's about a 25,000 hectare site, and we have a country obligation to protect the World Heritage Site because of these spectacular finds in the site. And the Rising Star cave system is a cave that's just opposite the Sterkfontein caves, and that's where Lee Berger has gone in and found these fossils in this cave. As you know, the media announcement happened on the 9th of May. Tomorrow is the official opening of the exhibition. And basically, there were two finds in the Rising Star cave. One that had the original Naledi fossils, and then they found a second chamber that had substantial fossils as well. So what they did at the media announcement was announce the dating of the first one, which is between 226,000 to 335,000 years ago, which means these Homo naledi, which is a cousin of Homo sapiens, were more than likely sharing the environment with our predecessors or our ancestors, which is just by itself is just a mind-blowing thought, because there's always been this perception in the scientific world that it was 200,000-300,000 years ago, it was only Homo sapiens and our direct ancestors who were around, apart from the Neanderthals in Europe. So this throws it wide open. The second chamber where Neo was found, Neo is a almost complete adult skeleton.
Wow.
And as you know, in the fossil world, to find a tooth is a big thing. To find an almost complete skeleton is a minefield. And so that's what was announced on the 9th of May, was this additional finding. And what they've also found was remains of a baby as well, which they haven't fully analyzed and haven't. So there's much more stuff coming out of not only the Rising Star cave, but in the cradle in general.
That's exciting. I think what I was reading about it is that it seems as though this particular species, which whatever it is, was intentionally buried their dead, which is a little bit like what we do. And I think that's probably the most exciting part about this discovery.
Yeah,
is it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's mind-blowing to just think that a related species could have been doing that, when we've always thought that it was specific to human or Homo sapiens, burying of dead and adornment and all of that sort of thing. But so Lee Berger has put it out there to the scientific world and to the general public to say that this is their hypothesis, that they believe that these bones were deliberately disposed of in these caves, and they've obviously, they've got backing for that to say that there weren't other fossils found with these bones. Normally, in these sorts of situations, you find antelope bones, rodents or birds or owls, those sorts of things. There's no evidence of any other bones, and Lieberger has put it out there. And if anybody else in the scientific community anywhere in the world can come up with an alternative hypothesis, then put it forward, because it's mind blowing to think that it could possibly be deliberate disposal of bodies. Yeah.
Well, I think the bones mean a lot more to me. A few years back, I was part of the original Dream Team that worked on a campaign called National Braai Day. And I know that it's been the bone of contention, pardon the pun. It's been a bit of a bone of contention in terms of celebrating Heritage Day and calling it Braai Day. But the thought behind actually starting this whole campaign every year was to get South Africans together in a non-political space to enjoy the one thing that we all do. So whether you are white or black or Afrikaans or English or Indian, whatever it is, vegetarian even, we all enjoy a braai. We don't all enjoy the same music. We might not enjoy the same sport. And one of the things that we did in our research was we found that in the Cradle of Humankind, they found that meat had been prepared over fire for human consumption. And voila, we thought National Braai Day, and we generally own it. We genuinely do. So I'm really excited that we are finding more proof and more evidence that this is indeed the Cradle of Humankind. But Mags, the Cradle of Humankind is about a whole lot more than just bones. I believe it was earmarked as a tourist destination soon after it was recognized as a World Heritage Site. Tell us a bit about the history of the Cradle of Humankind.
Sure. It was inscribed on the World Heritage List together with Isimangaliso wetland, previously St. Lucia in KwaZulu-Natal, as the first two sites to be inscribed on the World Heritage List in 1999. And the reason for that is the fossils found in the cradle and more particularly the geology of that area. So underground you have what they call a karst geology system, which is basically limestone rocks which have helped preserve the fossils. And that is why that particular area where this dolomite is found is the protected site, is the World Heritage Site, because that's where all the fossils are. But people like Lieberger are saying that it extends beyond that as well. And maybe in the future we may have to extend the boundaries of the cradle to include that. But it was inscribed in 1999 as a World Heritage Site. And so we have, as the authority that manages the site, we've implemented a master plan over the years, over the last 15, 17 years. And that ranges from upgrading of the infrastructure, upgrading of roads, the building of Marapeng as the official visitor center. As you know, Sterkfontein Caves is next to Marapeng as well, and that's also has an exhibition. It's owned by Wits University, so we have a very, very close working relationship with the university. So as the years have gone by, and Lieberger, I think, has thrown Sterkfontein Caves have always yielded considerable fossils. Mrs. Ples, the stuff from Robert Broom in the 40s, right through. There's been a whole lot of finds at Sterkfontein. But Lieberger in 2009 announced Australopithecus Sediba, which was found at the Malapa site, also in the cradle, which is also a new species, dated at 1.9 million years. And now the Rising Star cave system, where these fossils are virtually... Okay, it's very difficult to get into that cave. I mean, there's places where it's 18 centimeters in width. So you needed to get a few really small-built scientists to be able to fit in. I wouldn't have fit in. In fact, Lee went in himself a couple of months ago and got stuck, and they had to tie his hands and pull him out physically from this hole. So yeah, phenomenal things coming out of the cradle. But also just to say, Diane, that we have a dual function. I mean, we have to manage the cradle in terms of its World Heritage status. And that means looking after the natural environment. UNESCO has a term called the Outstanding Universal Value. So any World Heritage Site in the world to be inscribed on the list must have something that's completely unique, they call it authenticity and integrity. So it must be something that's completely unique, and it must be something that's not fragmented, but sort of in one space or one place. And what UNESCO has inscribed as a World Heritage Site is that the Dolomite area where the fossils are found. And so we have a dual responsibility of not only protecting and conserving and offering interpretation for the World Heritage Site, but also the tourism development aspect. And along with that goes your job creation, your skills development, all of those issues. And I think there's been a shift in terms of UNESCO. When the convention was established in the 70s, there was this sort of paradigm that if that is Victoria Falls, you protect it. It's a World Heritage Site, you protect it. If that is the Taj Mahal, you protect it. Taj Mahal being cultural site, Cradle is a cultural site, Victoria Falls is a natural World Heritage Site. So you have natural and cultural sites, and you have mixed sites as well. The Maloti Drakensberg is a typical example of a mixed site in that it has its natural uniqueness, but it also has the sand paintings in the caves there, so it makes it a mixed cultural and a natural site. So yeah, there's this dual responsibility, and it's finding the balance between managing the site, conserving it for future generations, encouraging more scientific research, but there's also UNESCO has shifted from that purely protection paradigm or approach to one of more involvement by communities, because often these sites are surrounded by communities, often poor communities, and what's the use of protecting a site if those benefits from having something as unique as a World Heritage Site doesn't flow to the people who have lived there for a long time. So there's this shift in by UNESCO that in order to manage the World Heritage Sites in a sustainable manner, it cannot be done in isolation from communities. And that's a fundamental shift. So we've got this responsibility of protecting and conserving the site and meeting our obligations with UNESCO, but at the same time, encouraging community beneficiation programs, community participation. Unfortunately, if you looked at the track record in Africa with World Heritage Sites, there aren't many cases where benefits have or there hasn't been meaningful beneficiation for communities. And in the Cradle, we've done some stuff over the years. We've established a casting project with WITS at Sterkfontein Caves that employs local community members to develop the casts of the fossils, which get sold and get pumped back into the community. But also at Marpeng, we in the last 3-4 years we established a set of cooperatives that produce a whole range of stuff, from beadwork and all your tourism products, and there's an outlet at Marpeng of these cooperatives. The other thing we do, Diane, is also because of our responsibility in terms of the World Heritage Convention Act to promote education and awareness, we sponsor a whole lot of learners every year to visit Marpeng and Sterkfontein as the official visitor centers in the Cradle. It's been a figure of 2,000 learners per year.
Wow.
That's outside of what Marpeng does with schools. But obviously for us, it should go beyond just schools in Gauteng. It requires much more funding to get schools from all over the country coming to the Cradle, because this is really truly an iconic World Heritage Site. It's an iconic site in South Africa. I don't think from all the 8 World Heritage Sites in South Africa that any of them have been in the limelight as the Cradle has, because it talks to our origins as a species. It talks to our common African ancestry. And it's indisputable that modern humans evolved in Africa. They say there was a group between 100 and 150,000 years ago that evolved, that spread out from Africa, and we all can trace our ancestry back to that common group. So it's really a significant World Heritage Site. It's an amazing story, and we have it right here on our doorstep.
Well, I think just as a quick comment, we do need to bring in Professor Lee Berger from Wits University at some point, because from what you've explained of his recent dilemma, being stuck between literally a rock and a hard place, anthropaleontology is not for the faint-hearted, clearly. So I do want to bring him in at some point and find out from him, like, how do they decide where they start digging? Like, it's an insane thought. I'm just saying, if I were to pursue that as a career, how do I know where to go first?
Yeah.
So that's quite exciting for me. The other thing is also just talking about World Heritage Sites and natural resources. There were some rumors a few years ago, and my first job, in fact, was in Cape Town tourism. And after that, I went into hospitality. And at some point, I mean, there was one guy who would come and stay at the hotel. He always had the presidential suite. He always wanted to have a mountain view. And in fact, he would pay so that the mountain could be lit up at night. And there was some talk at some point about him wanting to purchase the mountain and have it as his own, whether he was going to brand the mountain or whatever it was. I think it's really important, the work that you are doing. And also what I found in my discussions, I met with Marina Elliott, who's also from Wits University.
Yes.
And
She was
saying,
one of the original, what they call underground astronauts.
so she knows exactly.
She led the expedition into the Rising Star Cave. So she's by herself excavated a lot of those fossils.
Personally,
yeah.
Yeah, and I think what was interesting from what she was saying is that we are finding a lot more young people pursuing this particular field. And what's great for me is that we're finding a lot of young black people
That's right.
pursuing, whether it's paleontology on its own or anthropology or anthropaleontology.
Yeah.
It's all these long words, listeners, very long, long words that talk about bones and origins. That's, in a nutshell, for me, what it is. But I find that exciting. I mean, when you've had learners coming out, you're talking about 2,000 a year. What is the general response? Is it like a bit, it doesn't matter, or it matters a lot, or is it, what has the response been from the learners?
I think there's a general increase in interest in the science. Obviously, you have the evolution science debate, and a lot of people would say, how can you say I've evolved from primates or from monkeys? I mean, I don't believe that. I believe in religion, etc. But I don't see it like that, and I think a lot of the learners, a lot of the young people today are beginning to see the value of the science and the importance of it in understanding our origins, understanding where we come from, understanding where we are presently, and more importantly, I think, where we're going as a species. And that brings in a whole range of things in terms of us as a species, in terms of the planet, in terms of global climate change, all of that. And that's the reason why there's such a great emphasis on the education and awareness, because of the value that it can add to us as a species, to the planet, to our future.
Listeners, we're chatting to Mags Pillay, the director of the Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site. We're going to have a quick break, and we'll be back talking a bit more about the Almost Human exhibition, which will be launched tomorrow at Maropeng, the official visitors center for the Cradle of Humankind.
Have you ever thought about the power of social media? Social media has the power to make your business grow. Grow! Yeah! Why don't you let us manage your social media? Because our business is to see your business grow. Visit us at www.bstownmedia.co.za.
Stay tuned to Green Ovation, the show that gets you talking, keeps you informed on climate change, innovation, and green entrepreneurs who are changing the country, the continent, and the world. Sustainability, innovation, entrepreneurship, just a few of our favorite things. Find out more about us on greenovationsA.co.za. Follow me, Connect, on Twitter at @DD_Naidu now.
Listeners, you're back on the Green Ovation Show with me, Diane Naidu, and we're chatting to Mags Pillay, the director for the Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site. So, yes, it's all about the bones. We are talking about these finds that these crazy scientists are making, these new discoveries. It's not a space that I'm particularly au fait with. I don't understand it. it intrigues me. It fascinates me. We were just chatting during the break, and I said to Mags, how do these archaeologists, anthropologists, paleontologists know where to dig? Where do they start, Mags? How did this come about? I mean, the first find. Tell me about that.
I think, because of the technological advancements these days, they have such sophisticated means of dating fossils. Look, in terms of finding fossils, you still got to dig. There's no new technologies that sort of point out exactly where fossils are.
There are no bone detectors, in other words. No, toot, 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 none of those.
I'm sure they'll come up with those pretty soon. But yeah. So in the past, Diane, it's been very difficult. You'd find a tooth here or a tiny toe bone there, that sort of thing. But with the Sediba fossils in 2009, Lee Berger virtually stumbled on them while walking through the Nash property in the Cradle of Humankind. It's an area he's been through a million times before, and his son actually said to him, "Dad, this looks like a fossil." And when he saw it, he knew immediately it was the clavicle bone, and he did his PhD on the clavicle, and he knew immediately it was a hominid fossil, and that's how the Malapa site was, virtually on the surface. But obviously there's lots more buried underground. With the Rising Star cave system, that's a fascinating story, because you get cavers who would do caving for fun. I mean, these people will go deep inside
extremists.
Caves. Absolutely. Absolutely. And in tiny, dark places that nobody would think of going in.
It's like a Bear Grylls kind of adventure. Yeah?
Absolutely. And they spotted the first Homo naledi fossils and took some photos and went straight to Lee and said and showed it to him, and he was just blown away, because he could tell immediately that this is not something that's recent modern humans, and that's how the Rising Star and the Homo naledi story started. And it took them a while, from 2013, I think 2014, to excavate those ones. It took another year to analyze them. That's why the announcement was only made in 2015. And then with this new find, they had this joint announcement last week, 2 weeks ago, about the dating of the original fossils, and now the new find, which is Neho and other stuff.
So, well, I'll tell you what excites me about it.
Sorry, Dan, maybe just to say, in East Africa is also a fossil-rich area. So there's only really 2 areas in the world that have yielded considerable amount of fossils, and particularly fossils related to modern humans. And but the East African one, the difference between East Africa and Cradle is that East Africa has volcanic layers. So these have been preserved by successive eruptions of volcanoes and stuff like that. Whereas in the Cradle, the geology is different. It's this karst system I spoke about, the dolomite, and that's what's preserved. What's preserved these fossils here. So there's this East Africa, Southern Africa debate, and the picture is still incomplete. It's an incomplete puzzle, because East Africans say no, you can't say that you are the Cradle of Humankind, because more than likely it evolved in the equatorial belt. But with the Homo naledi, I mean, it throws it wide open to say it could very well have started, or modern humans could really have actually originated in Southern Africa more than Central or East Africa. But whether it's East or whether it's Southern, it's still Africa,
I like that. Well, Mags, I'm going to ask you to go on a journey with me, just based on what you said. I like the fact that this exhibition is called Almost Human. I'm not sure that in society we really know what it means to be human. I like the fact that in Ethiopia, their humanity, in a sense, was preserved by this volcanic eruption. So a bad thing happened, and it preserved these traces of humankind. In South Africa, it's a little bit different. We've got, what did you call it there?
The dolomite layer.
The dolomite layer that has preserved traces of humanity. And I think before the show started, we were talking about how the world is changing, how things are changing globally, how political and socioeconomic systems are being challenged to the core. The way that we've done things as human beings, as politicians, as business owners, it hasn't worked. It's not working. It clearly is not working. And I want to bring that conversation to tourism. sustainable tourism to what I like to call the shared economy. I mean, we have a lot of, in the country, we have huge monopolies, right? We've got these big hotel chains. We've got restaurant chains. We've got all these retail outlets. And it becomes a bit hard for smaller players, entrepreneurs, aspirant small business owners to really participate in that space and to operate in that space in a way that is symbiotic with the bigger companies, in a way that reflects our humanity. A few weeks back, I had the opportunity to sit on a panel. I'm not sure why Gibbs invited me, but they invited me to serve on a panel with about 50 MBA students from the Michigan State University. They were coming to the country to understand what the differences are between their entrepreneurs and ours. I could see the eyebrows being raised and the eyes rolling back in some heads when I said I like the fact that in South Africa I live in a country that is predominantly black, because there's something to be said about African values in the way that we not only live our lives, but in the way that we do business. And one of the big insights that came from the group at the end when we had to wrap and people had to share their views on what the big differences were. And there was a resounding thought and a resounding notion that what they'd taken from our group was that people become entrepreneurs in South Africa for a lot different reasons than they do in the States. In the States, it's about self-enrichment, and they're unapologetic about it. We, in South Africa, and from the group that we had, we were a small panel. We had spent time with 4 different groups. They broke up this team of 50 into 4 groups. So we interacted individually as entrepreneurs with these different groups. So we never shared information per se. But the one thing was that they loved the fact that in South Africa, entrepreneurs and small business owners do what they do every day and often for years without making any sort of money, never mind breaking even or making a profit. But they do it because they want to make a difference. I think that is why, for me, the Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site, or can I call it the Human Heritage Site, is so exciting for me because the opportunity for us to demonstrate what is possible truly exists in this space. Share with me your thoughts on that. I mean, it's a lot of that I've covered.
It's an absolutely central part to what we were talking about earlier on. I mean, you have a iconic World Heritage Site, and without the involvement or without bringing poor communities or the communities surrounding World Heritage Sites into the buy-in of what it means and what it means to them and how it can change their lives is central to the whole thing. Just to point out also, Diane, that the site itself is 95% of it is on private land. So all your fossil sites are actually sitting within private ownership. And it takes relationships with those landowners in terms of inspecting the sites and doing all the regulatory work. But also in that space, you have a lot of tourism products, a lot of restaurants, bed and breakfasts, 5-star establishments across the spectrum. I think there's 300-400 different types of offerings in the Cradle. And it's a matter of sort of pooling all of those or bringing all of those role players together. So it's the local municipalities, it's the local communities, those within the site and those on the fringes of the site, to look at ways of how best to exploit this concept of an inclusive economy. And you were saying earlier about an inclusive economy and a shared economy. And so those are the things we're looking at. We're currently doing a study with Wits University in terms of this is what we've achieved with the Cradle to date in terms of what was envisaged in the original master plan. But quite frankly, we haven't done enough for communities, you know. And how can we shift that focus now to both managing the site on the one hand, but putting a greater emphasis on benefits for local people, you know.
But does it not require, like, it might be a question that should be directed at provincial level or at local government level, because I understand that there's this relationship that needs to exist. My criticism has been, and I've worked with government, not inside government, for a number of years. What I found is that, and it happens even at a cabinet level today, is that we don't generally work together. We work in silos.
Yeah.
So my strategy might not agree with yours. So I might be in economic development and yours might be in tourism and another might be in agriculture and rural development. We should all be singing off the same hymn sheet, but we're not. I think it requires that kind of integrated planning, integrated implementation as well. Is that something which you are still grappling with, or is it getting better in terms of managing this inclusive growth?
Yeah, that's a critical point.
Yeah.
Because in the space, in the Cradle space, the local authority, and in particular Mukhali City, you have Mukhali City, it's their jurisdiction that the site is on, but it's a World Heritage Site, so it's a national government competency in the form of environmental affairs, but it's actually province in terms of us who manage the site on behalf of the country and the world. So it's that symbiotic relationship, and especially the relationship between local authorities and province, and how to manage the, especially with the Cradle, Diane, it's the land use management thing is a big thing, because people see the World Heritage Site, you have lifestyle developers who want to develop as close to the site as possible. Lots of people want to live close to a World Heritage Site. So we've got to manage the land use aspect. Because of the dolomite, like I said, you can't have, for example, a massive township development in the World Heritage Site. But what we are saying is that the communities that do live in the site, we need to, with the local authorities, address the housing needs, address the job creation development needs. And that can only be done when there's, like you say, everybody singing off the same. It's still a challenge. It's still a challenge, but we're working on it and getting there. Yeah.
I think, and again, it's not, and Koketso, our sound engineer, is probably so tired of me saying it week after week whenever I get the chance. I talk about Rwanda. So Rwanda for me is, this is my show, so it's my views and I can say it. Rwanda for me is by far one of Africa's most important and most significant success stories. In fact, when we were chatting with these guys from the States, they said, well, you're like a dictator if you like Rwanda. I said, well, some people call him the benevolent dictator, but there's method in his madness. The one thing that I really appreciate about how he's been managing the country is that they have 21-year policies in place that don't change regardless of who's mayor, who's a minister, who's at provincial level. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. In terms of preserving particularly their water resources around their dams and their rivers, they've also had lifestyle developers approaching them saying, look, people want houses on the river. He's like, we can do that, we can say yes, but if you stay here and we allow you to do that, there will be no river in 10 to 20 years' time. So I think there's definitely something to be said for long-term planning, but long-term commitment that follows through. And this is the thing in South Africa, isn't it? We've got probably the best policies. The implementation and follow-through isn't always there.
Yeah.
As it changes from minister to minister, authority to authority, it changes. So I want to talk a bit more about this paradox that exists in any tourist environment. I mean, you go to Brazil and then there's Rio, but then there's also the favelas. You fly into Cape Town and it's magnificent, depending on which way they've flown and whether they go around the False Bay coast or the Atlantic seaboard. It's incredible. You touch down, you disembark, and as you're leaving, it's Khayelitsha and Gugs. That's what you see. And I've struggled with it, having come from a tourist background. That was my first job, was in tourism. I don't know, I've struggled with it. I do struggle with it because you have these tour guides and tour operators who will take people into the townships to show them the townships. Those drives and those trips that they've paid for doesn't benefit the community in any way. We've got to find a way. I'm not sure what the answers are. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? You were talking about it. You've got these communities, but how do we ensure that they benefit? How do we bring them into the program?
Yeah, no, critical point. I mean, inequality, is not, it's not a South African only phenomenon, but we know that South Africa is one of the most unequal societies in the world. And that is why, Diane, I mentioned earlier on, we're doing this inclusive economy research study with WITS, and the focus is not on the broader management of the cradle, but specifically on entrepreneurship and how we can catapult it to higher levels. So yes, going forward, definitely our focus is going to be more on an inclusive economy, on community beneficiation. But yeah, it's a tough one, you know.
I know, probably not fair to direct it at you. Probably should be asking number 1 or number 2 about it. But I think it's interesting. I think, Koketsa, we're going to go to a short break. We'll come back and we'll talk a bit more about entrepreneurship. We'll talk a little bit about NDP. We'll talk a little bit about women empowerment. When we come back, we'll still be chatting to Mags Pillay, the director for the Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site. Stay tuned.
If you're looking for an information technology and communication solution company suitable for your small or medium-sized enterprise, then look no further than Hive ICT. They aim to provide SMEs with the same level of service expected by large corporations without sacrificing the personal relationship they have with their customers. Offering remote and on-site support, as well as IT system design, network design and installations, server and workstation maintenance, and web design, web application development, and more. Visit www.hiveict.com right away. Making a bold statement yet blending into the surrounding suburbs of Melville, 27 Boxes is a realization of edgy design and practical implementation. A radical departure from the shopping malls of our generation, yet not a return to the high streets of our youth. 27 Boxes showcases the best of a shopping centre set in a garden, surrounded by the bohemian suburb that is Melville. 27 Boxes, shop, play, eat.
And you're back with me, Diane. We are still chatting to the director for the Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site. Mags Pillay is joining us in studio, and we've been having an interesting conversation. I have apologized during the break for perhaps asking questions which should not have been directed at him, but it's great that we get this conversation going. I think it's important that we keep talking. At some point we will start doing, but I think we've got to be open and honest about where we are at as a country, where we are at in terms of the goals that we've set. And before we went to the break, we were chatting about the participation of entrepreneurs. Youth in particular for me is quite close to my heart. I've got a 17-year-old boy who's in matric this year. What are his options next year? What will he be doing with his life? And then, of course, women empowerment, again, against the backdrop of such violence and brutality upon women in society, in South Africa in particular. I was reading, Mags, that the femicide rate in South Africa is 6% higher than the global combined rate of femicide. That's shocking. As a society, you were saying we are one of the most unequal societies in the world. But I know that there is a commitment from government. There is a commitment at the highest level. I often refer to our National Development Plan, which touts the small business sector as one which is able to deliver on 90% of the jobs required in the market. But then there's always the question, is our education and our qualifications matching what the market requires right now? The courses which universities and tertiary institutions are offering, do they match the skills required for future jobs? What are the future skills? So I want to talk to you a bit more about opportunities that exist for youth and women in the tourism space. Not necessarily Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site. I know that's the company or the organization you're representing today. But let's talk about the real opportunities that exist. I could be completely wrong because I am Cape Townian by birth, but I'm a naturalized Joburger. And what I found in Gauteng in particular, that there's a thriving entrepreneurship community. There's a huge ecosystem, and we've got lots of players plugged in. We've got the Innovation Hub, which is a GGDA initiative. We've got Resolution Circle. We've got the City of Joburg with the Green City Startup and the Community Innovation Funds, which they had going. I believe our newly appointed mayor has scrapped all of those wonderful programs. But there's a huge community in Gauteng to build entrepreneurship, to support small business. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also, Diane, the responsibility of the Cradle sits at a provincial government level, and we fall under the Department of Economic Development. And there's a huge drive from the department side for exactly what you're saying about entrepreneurial development, about skills development, about bringing people into the main economy. And even though the Cradle has its own little sort of mandate, it still fits into the bigger picture of complementing what the department is doing in the province, in that space, in what they call the Western Corridor. So there's agro-processing plants that's being talked about, and a huge drive from the Department of Economic Development to develop that area, not only the tourism space but others as well. But the Cradle is an anchor project in that part of the world. And it's up to us to sort of take that agenda forward, bringing in more people, more youth, more women. I think in terms of the opportunities for youth and women, aside from what we can do in terms of scientific research, encouraging more youth to take up careers in anthropology and archaeology, in paleoarchaeology, in paleoanthropology. The list is endless in that field. But also for us to... We have a Cradle of Humankind Trust, which has been pretty dormant in that we don't have tons of money going into it. It was linked to the whole concept of Marupeng, and as Marupeng developed and made more money would go into the trust, and we would be able to disperse that for more scientific research, allocate bursaries, encourage youth to study in those areas, but also for community beneficiation programs. Unfortunately, we haven't, it hasn't panned out the way we had anticipated, with millions going into the trust. So that's one aspect of it, but like I said to you, we undertaken the study with Wits to say how can we catapult the whole entrepreneurial, so it offers more opportunities for youth. And
when is that research coming out? When will we have a first view of it?
It should be by 2018. It should be all done and dusted.
Yeah.
But also, I think it's a matter of being innovative as well. If I can give you an example, the Cradle has become probably the number one cycling destination in the country, and possibly on the continent. I mean, if you had to go there on a weekend, there's just thousands of cyclists, and that in itself can present opportunities for local people.
It's a totally new way of thinking. I'm just saying, not even living, I'm just saying to cycle is a new way of thinking.
Yeah.
For me, I call it renewable energy. That's renewable energy.
For sure.
You might be completely exhausted, but it's a new approach to the way you view transit. That's green transport for me. It excites me. Yeah?
Sure. Non-motorized means of transport. But the spin-offs from that, I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface in terms of what we can do with communities and the cycling community. So we're looking at ways of improving that sort of opportunity.
So tell me, it's maybe a very foolish question, but if I don't have a car and I live in Tembisa, I could easily find my way to a taxi rank at Bree or North. How do I get to Marupeng? Just as a start.
Yeah, you seem to hit on all the the pertinent questions. When Marupeng was built as the official visitor centre, it was built sort of off the Dolomite, which brings us back to the point about land use development, etc. So it was sort of built off the Dolomite, and so it's slightly outside of the World Heritage, the core area of the World Heritage Site. It is quite far out for the ordinary person, and that's one of the main reasons why we haven't pulled. The original modelling said we'd get 500,000 visitors a year for Sterkfontein and for Marupeng, and that would generate, huge amounts of revenue. And from that, our contract with the Marupeng company, part of that will go into the Cradle Trust. We haven't pulled 500,000 visitors for a range of reasons. The location is one. Has the marketing been all that effective? A range of things. So yes, transport to the official visitor centre, transport to the Cradle, And if we talk about the general public going to the cradle, it's really Sterkfontein and Malpeng that they can go to. Because all the other fossil sites on private land, only the scientists have...
or you go for a spa retreat for a
that's
weekend.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you've hit the nail on the head in terms of transportation. Because you can't, if you're living in Kagiso, you can't just take a taxi to Malpeng.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even if you do get to Malpeng, it's your entrance fee, which is pretty exorbitant.
It's prohibitive for some.
For most.
Yeah. Yeah.
For most.
Yeah.
And I mean, other museums throughout the world, if you look at the Natural History Museum in London, for example, it's open to the public for free. You know? So those subsidies need to come also from national government. If we want to open the site up to more people. So it is prohibitive. For the ordinary family of four, you're looking at transport costs, lunch for the day, entrance fees. Most South Africans can't afford that, you know?
Well, I think it's an important question to ask because so years ago when I did engage in and out, dip my toes in and out of the water in terms of working with government and liaising across 3 tiers of government, I worked in public transport. And the company that I worked for was called Modelink, and we were funded by the World Bank. It was part of our 2004 Olympic bid pitch, where we had to get an organization to manage all of these different modes of transport as one little space, one little hub. And what had come out of these discussions when we had made inputs on the white paper for transport was that spatial development planning was engineered and architectured in certain ways by a government that protected white communities. So Cape Town is a lot more segregated geographically and in terms of infrastructure than any other place that I've seen in the country. In that if there was an uprising in Gugulethu or in Langa, they could shut it down completely. The roads allowed them to do that. And the reason why I mention this is that Cape Town is a little bit different in terms of tourism. They're very sophisticated. They've been like a top 20 destination for God knows how many years, even way before our first democratic election. But still you will find people who live in the Cape Flats who have never been to town, but it's possible. They've never been to the beach, but it's possible. So I think that's, for me again, it's part of that inclusivity. It's part of that inclusive journey as well. I think when people have access to different places, they start to see opportunities. It's with kids from Tembisa or Hammanskraal even going out to Madopeng and visiting the caves and seeing those opportunities. So that's really important for me.
No, absolutely.
I think I just want to share with you a dream that I have. So one of my dreams is to have a hotel similar to the Cedar campus where you pay for your education by taking care of the place. So lecturers come in and out, and you get proper qualifications. It's based somewhere in Johannesburg CBD. So for me, it's about having this hotel space where people can learn about the hospitality industry. 1, 2, they can learn about tourism. 3, they can learn about agriculture. 4, they can learn about architecture. All these, for me, obviously I'm a little bit biased because I'm all about sustainability and climate change, where they can learn in a shared space where their service in that hotel space, whether it be they are tour guides or whatever it is, that they get paid a little bit of stipend, but they also pay for the qualification. That's one of my big dreams. We've just got to find an investor. Investors, if you're listening, one of you big hotel groups, let's look at creating centers for learning that are accessible, that make sense not only for the elite, but also make sense for the poor. We're going to be taking a short break before we come back for our last few minutes of the show. You are still listening to me, Diane Naidu, on the Green Innovation Show. And we're still chatting to Mags Pillay, the director for the Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site.
Are you an innovator and solution provider? The Innovation Hub is looking for entrepreneurs in the ICT, advanced manufacturing, bioeconomy, and the green economy sectors.
If you have an innovative prototype or startup business which addresses an existing market need and you're predominantly based in Gauteng, we invite you to apply for one of our incubation programs. For more information, visit theinnovationhub.com or call 012-844-0000. The Innovation Hub is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Gauteng Growth and Development Agency.
And you're back with me, Diane Naidu. I'm still chatting to Mags Pillay. It's been an interesting conversation. He is the director for the Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site. So, Mags, I think we've nearly solved all of the world's problems in our conversation this morning. Nearly. We've spoken about the bones, i.e. the fossils. We've spoken about the Almost Human exhibition, which is the largest display of fossils, I believe. Is it in the world or is it only in Africa?
Well, tomorrow it's probably going to be it is the biggest assemblage of fossils, of hominid fossils ever put on display. So it's all the original Naledi fossils plus the new find fossils, and those are going to be on display at Malpeng. The opening is tomorrow. It's being opened by I'm not sure. I don't think the Premier can make it, but
the MEC, I believe,
and the
is,
mayors and mayors, etc., are going to be there. And other role players as well. Lieberger will be there as well. So the official opening is tomorrow, and it'll be on display for, I'm not sure exactly how long, but there's a whole new exhibition on Homo naledi, and it's open to the public from tomorrow. So get there.
So, Trump, if you're listening as well, you said America first. This is South Africa first. We've got the largest display of fossils in one space. So take that from our team. I just want to close. Just the last few minutes of our show, I want to talk a little bit. Coquette is saying to me, we've got 5 minutes. I need to get a soundbite from you. Climate change. It's not just about tree huggers saving the rhinos. It's not a white middle class issue. Tourism must embrace sustainable living and sustainable principles in some shape or form. I think we work in these circles. Us greenies, we say the same thing. We are equally passionate about it. But climate change is not going to happen. Climate change is happening. What is the Cradle of Humankind's commitment in terms of managing? I mean, we've gone beyond mitigation. We're now in survival mode. What is the commitment from the Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site in terms of managing the effects or the impacts of climate change?
I think maybe just as a starting point, and there's always the concern from UNESCO in terms of the outstanding universal value of the site, which is the actual fossils which are set underground. So in terms of climate change, there's no direct threat to the outstanding universal value, which are the fossils which will be in the ground, which, just the Rising Star cave system will provide decades of research for scientists. So in that sense, there's no direct threat from climate change on the fossils. But obviously, we've got to think beyond that. And it ties in with the whole responsible tourism initiative. It's about getting all those product owners in the area to buy into responsible tourism. Into
solar power, I'd like to see that on the rooftops.
All of that, yeah. We're doing some wonderful things at Malpeng in terms of green initiatives. And I think you know about Hominin House, which is
I saw that. It's amazing. It's a little gym.
The learner facility and that sort of thing. But it's also about encouraging all the product owners, all the land owners, all the stakeholders in the cradle to source from local, producers, to recycle, all of that sort of thing, which ties in with responsible tourism. And we've recently established a tourism association in the cradle, and that could be the vehicle for coordinating all the stakeholders and advancing that sort of agenda. So critical point.
Well, I look forward to coming out and addressing your tourism association, participating in workshops and seminars and training sessions and all of that. I'm really passionate about ensuring and making sure that we do the right things so we preserve humanity. Not only for ourselves, but for future generations, our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, if we even get there. Mags, it's been great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. And don't forget about the opening of the exhibition tomorrow, open to the public.
I look forward to it. So listeners, that's it from me, Diane Naidu, on the Green Ovation Show. And we always close the show with one little statement. We have 54 million voices in South Africa. I'm using mine. Use yours.
brandlive.co.za. Guess who got brands talking? brandlive.co.za.